So today I wanted to respond to a comment that I saw on one of my videos recently. It was somebody, when I was talking about the relationship between chronic health problems, chronic illness, whatever the situation is, doesn't matter, the details, about that and awakening. And to the person, it felt like their awakening process had been messed up by the chronic health challenge, that they had lost the clarity. And I'm very glad they made that comment, because it's such a good point to talk about, right? Because that's exactly how the mind will perceive it, is that we have this maybe period where things become very clear. Maybe we have a shift. Maybe we see through a part of the illusion of a separate self. Maybe, we have a big insight, and maybe we enter a state of flow for a while. Maybe things are just happening. It's just life. And then shit happens, right? Then we hit the shadow. And for me, Angelo DeLulo and his book and his YouTube channel was such a helpful guide for this process, because he lays it out so clearly that that's exactly how the process goes, that you will have a shift, and then you will have to traverse the shadow. You will have to come into contact with all of the emotional repression. You'll have to come into contact with all of the parts of yourself that you're terrified of, that you've learned to repress innocently at first, but it's repressed, right? It is in your subconscious. It is all of this content that needs to come up and be integrated. And the funny thing about the shadow work is it often very much plays out in life, right? It is generally life challenges that will bring us into the shadow. And it can be very physical as well. I've heard a lot of people talk about their experience with deep awakening, right? So not just a first shift and then feeling like you've lost it, but having traversed the shadow and then come out the other side to liberation or enlightenment, or however you want to talk about it. Often people that Angelo has interviewed on his channel. And it's you need to know that this is how it goes, right? Because otherwise it will feel like that. So this is why I wanted to record this video, that nothing's gone wrong. You haven't lost anything. This is exactly the process. You have to see, what are these life challenges bringing up in you that is triggering your mind, that is so difficult to face. I mean, it is difficult. Traversing the shadow is wild. You have no idea how much content there is, right? And it's different. I have no idea what somebody else's shit is that they need to feel and see, but it kind of tends to go along a similar line in some ways of certain emotions that are at the root of it, generally shame and fear of helplessness. Those are kind of like the core ones, that's what we're most terrified of, sitting in pure not knowing. And the reason we use shame, we repress shame, is because it points quite clearly to the fact that there's no one there, right? So we build up this separate identity, this separate self, but there's a part of us that knows that it doesn't actually exist. And that feels like shame, because shame, Angelo pointed this out very clearly one day when he was working with somebody, and I was watching on one of his things. And he broke down the experience of shame from I'm not good enough to be loved, down to I'm not good enough, down to I am not. And the thing from my own personal experience with shame is it comes up when it comes up, right? It's like I've shared that video with people before, and if it's not the right time, it's just it's just going to go into your mind, and it's not really going to take you into that pure space. But what does take us into these spaces is life events, right? So that is why, the life challenges, the real intense life challenges that we face is so important for the shadow work, because otherwise we can't get to this core stuff, right? But don't worry, life will bring it to you when it's time. But here's the thing, is how is your mind going to perceive this? And when I see somebody commenting saying, my awakening process was messed up by this and that, and Okay, I understand what you're talking about, but what about this that's happened to me? This is my problem. That's it. There's nothing apart from this, right? So that's why I wanted to address it, because it's so helpful to know that. Because I can totally understand if you don't know that, if you didn't have such a clear teacher that understands the entire process, like Angelo has been for me, that it's all okay. It's all part of the process. And I'm not saying, I don't know who somebody's teachers have been, and there's incredible teachers out there. But if somebody doesn't point that out to you, that the sitting in pure existential terror and real terror, real feeling like you're just absolutely helpless and your whole life has fallen apart and you're just broken beyond repair. And that can happen before awakening and drive us into awakening, but often it's more intense after awakening because there's no more filters, right? There's no more distractions that work, right? The tendency to distract can still arise. It has happened for me many a time. And then it's often a precursor to some emotional thing surfacing, right? So, the tendency to distract can still arise, but it doesn't work. But it works in that you have to see that it doesn't work. You just have to see everything. You have to see your resistance. You have to see your avoidance. You have to see your distraction. And then you have to see what you're distracting yourself from. And if you're really authentic and genuine and have gotten to the place where you're no longer seeking a way out, you're no longer seeking a shortcut, then you realize that you have no choice but to feel into the depths of that without making a story out of it. That's what's key, right? Because it doesn't mean that you don't face challenge. It doesn't mean that you don't have to sit with very difficult things, but you just stop making a story out of it. You just know that it's part of the process. You're just like, okay, this is what I need to see. This is what I need to feel. And at the same time as you can do what feels right to address it as well. Like that was what my last video was about spiritual bypassing. How do you know when you're doing it? Well, only you can know, and you just find out through trial and error. So it's like there's stuff that needs to be felt and needs to be experienced, but you don't need to negate the relative. You don't need to, pretend that there's only the absolute, there's nobody, there's nothing to do. I mean, there's both. So, I guess just to bring that all together, because I touched on different points of view there, is focus on what is arising that your mind wants to turn into a problem, and realize that that is reality showing you what needs to be explored for this process to deepen, as opposed to spinning the story that the process was going along nicely until this happened and messed up the process. That story, that narrative is innocent, right? It's like you can, that narrative can still be there in the background, but you just don't cling to it. That's the difference, right? So I'm not judging your mind for having that narrative, but if you are holding onto that narrative and believing it is true, then you're going to feel stuck, right? You're going to believe that, wow, I messed up the awakening process, or you're resisting something, right? You're basically resisting this feeling, and then your mind turns it into a story to justify the resistance. That's what I often see in the comments. Somebody trying to convince me why they have justification in their resistance. So, like, oh, but, I've been doing this and this and this, and I'm still stuck. So what you're saying doesn't apply to me. And I mean, only you can see it. So just, you got to be authentic with yourself. I mean, I feel like I'm saying the same thing in every video, but it does seem to land differently, the different ways that I talk about it. That you have to be honest with yourself. You have to inquire into yourself, right? I can't do anything for you, right? I can make videos that can point you and, I can point out the resistance that seems clear for me about you, but I can't feel it for you, right? And I don't want to feel it for you because the juice is in the feeling. Liberation, like freedom, I don't know where I'm at in this path, but everything just feels absolutely fine. vote fluctuates. The liberation is in the feeling of everything, in the beauty of everything is unconditional love, right? Every experience, every sound, every sensation, everything is unconditional love coming forth in that experience. But the mind builds so much on top of it. And to realize unconditional love, you have to burn through the ego, right? The unconditional love, Angela has said this before, and I love it, is unconditional love will burn a hole right through your ego structures to do what it needs to do. And that's what this process can feel like. You can realize unconditional love, and it's not personal. It's not going to give you what you want. It's not. It will do what it needs to do, and it will put you into contact with what you need to be put into contact with. And all you can really do is be on board with the process, right? That's the difference. It's so difficult to talk about what you can and can't do, but at the same time, there's lots that you can do. But sometimes what you have to do is active, sometimes it's surrender. But what you can do is you can be on board with, okay, I'm really not in control of this, but you can be willing. You can be willing. You can be willing to see your own kind of, where you're pulling the rug over your own eyes, your own delusion, your own. You just have to be honest with yourself, right? You have to be honest. Like, when I'm making this comment, what am I trying to get? Am I trying to get complicity so that I don't have to feel something? Maybe. So, yeah, that's, nothing's gone wrong. Absolutely nothing's gone wrong. Nothing can go wrong, but you can make your life more difficult by believing the thoughts that say that something has gone wrong. And sometimes you just need to practice, right? You need to disentangle from the mind. Because if I'm saying this, that, don't get caught up in your thoughts, I can see how somebody's mind might say, but how do I not get caught up in my thoughts? But what about this? What about that? And then you actually need to kind of maybe practice going into the sensations, disentangling what's a thought, what's a sensation. And again, I can't do that for you. I can invite you to, I can tell you how I did it, and I can share perspectives and all of that, but you have to get to the place where you're willing to sit in the unknown, to not know. That's what it's all about. So, yes, as always, I hope this lands, and I wish you the best on your path.